So when you're building to Codat, hopefully you've looked at our docs and it's given you a reasonable understanding of what data to expect and what endpoints you can access. In the portal, that's expanded upon with a data browsing section. So in this example case, I've pulled some sandbox data for a company, and here I can see all that sandbox invoice data, in this case, represented in a table, and I can click on that, and I've got a visualization of an invoice pretty much as I would expect to see it either in the accounting source platform, or I might want to represent it in my own UIs. And that's all nicely supported by, well, this is how you make the request to get this data, and this is the JSON underpinning that table. However, taking this simple tabulated data and actually beginning to manipulate it, to enrich it, to combine it, to turn it into a useful kind of metric, that might not be so difficult without actually diving into code. And maybe you want a quick way to do that, or maybe critically, you begin to need to loop other stakeholders in your organization. So maybe it's someone from a data team who actually might be expecting this data to come in a CSV format, and Codat data is kind of deeply nested in some areas, or like, returns objects, not simple flat structures. Or maybe you've got some kind of lending experts who are actually much more comfortable working in Excel and building models there, at least as a kind of prototype. Well, how do you begin to unlock them and their knowledge, or begin to build the kind of visualizations or prototype visualizations that would kind of inform what you're going to build in your platform? Well, one tool that might be useful to get you going is Retool. So as you can kind of see in this animation, Retool offers a really nice partially drag and droppable system for building, in this case, it's going to be dashboards. And it combines both this kind of low-code drag and drop approach and this quite powerful interface with, I guess, all the kind of coding flexibility you probably need in terms of making requests, accessing even SQL structures. But yeah, you can make RESTful requests, you can normalize that data, and then you can represent it in tables, you can represent it in charts, you can interact with it, and clicking and things like that. And you can actually build very quickly really powerful things. So here is one I've made earlier, and in this case I've built a text box which takes an authorization header. I wouldn't recommend doing this, but this is simple for this example. I've put in a table that, well, in this case, I've got a list of the endpoints I'm calling here. I get my companies, I list those companies, I can click on a company, and that company ID is then populated here. Again, more for visualization than anything. I can see the name of the company I'm currently focusing on. It then lists the accounts data type for that company. I've got a pie chart here that shows the concentration on those accounts. So 43% of the current balance of all these companies' accounts is in this one account. And then I've also gone and got the categorized profit and loss statement. To access all these data types, I'm using the lending API. And then I've got a really simple over time representation of this P&L. I'm going to show you how to throw something like this together at pace. If you just want to get going with this kind of example I've already built, I'm going to export it to JSON, and you can use that as a template, and you'll find that linked in the description of the video. But I'm going to show you how quick it is to actually get something like this going. So let's go back to home. And we're going to click Create App, and we're going to call it Company Data Viewer 2, I guess. I already have one. Cool. So ignore this kind of mock-up that it starts you with. So we're going to do, we're going to start with a text input. And as in the previous example, we're going to use this as a way of easily allowing someone to put in an authorization header with which we'll authenticate all the API calls from later. Now I'm going to copy this API key I made earlier, and I'm going to paste it in. I'm going to delete it after this video, so don't try anything funny. But and again, not super secure, but useful in this example. Then I'm going to write my first resource query. Now, in this case, I'm querying Codat directly, and I'm going to go to the lending API, and I want my companies list. So I'm just going to copy the URL. And by default, it's selected Manage DB. We're not interested in that. We want REST query, REST API. I want to paste that in there. And then we need to write the authorization, use this auth header value in the authorization header. In this, we're going to call text input 1. Now, when I created this text input, it gave it a name of text input 1. Maybe that's not very useful. So I'm going to call this auth header. And now we can see, because I didn't save it, if I had already saved this, it would have updated automatically, but I'm just going to replace that value for now. And if we click save and run, we should see a list of companies as we expected. Now, if I click here to add, we can see some of the components that Retool provides. Out of the box, drag that in, expand it, and because it's smart and it knows that the last query I made was get companies, it's already used that query. It's already used known that I want to access the results field on it. So it does kind of help you get going quickly. And maybe I also want to give that a more intelligent name than query 1. So list companies. Nice. So then in my previous example, and I can do all kind of things like explore this, sort by last sync date. So these are my more recently synced companies. I can see kind of what platforms we're using. Maybe I want to change the way I represent a platform. So rather than a string, I want to make it like a tag, and that will make it kind of prettier, I guess. Cool. So I'm interested in digging into one company. As I kind of showed you before, I put in another text box, and I called this company ID, and we're also going to call the text box that so we can reference it more intelligently as well. And in the example I gave, I wanted to be able to click on these rows to pre-fill that. So we're going to use event handlers. So this is a good example of kind of one of the cool things Retool takes care of for you. So when a user selects the row, I want to control a component, because I'm going to control this component. We're going to select company ID, and we're going to set the value to table1 dot selected row dot ID. Cool. So, and you can see that's now rigged up and controlled. What are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to make a new resource query, and it's remembered what I selected last time. And this time we're going to go list accounts. Very nice. So if I go back to our lending API documentation and click on financial statements, I can get the list accounts endpoint. And if I go back, paste that in. So in the docs, kind of there was a placeholder for company ID. In this case, we need to replace that with company ID dot value, and that means we're accessing the value of this text box. And then we're going to put in authorization again, and we're going to access that auth header dot value as we did in the previous request. Now, if I save and run that, again, successful results. And we're going to do exactly what we did last time, put in a table, and it has worked exactly as it did before. And in this case, I'm going to sort them by current balance, because I'm most interested in finding, actually in this case, an account that does have some accounts with balance. Cool. So what do I want to kind of dig onto this? So one common representation of accounts data might be concentration, as I showed you before. So let's drag a chart in here. Now in this case, it has not been as successful in guessing what I wanted to do. I wanted to specifically access the results on the data. And I'm going to choose pie chart. And there we go. I now have a pie chart showing concentration. The label is the ID. That's not very useful to me. So let's replace that with name. And here we go. Cool. Now, I could also do some smart things like, well, for instance, valid data type links is not going to be exportable easily to CSV. And maybe I want to flatten that, or so I might want to replace valid data type links with, I don't know, some value within there. Just an example. I don't think you would actually want to do that in this case. Or like metadata, right? I might want to bring is deleted to the top level and then filter things out. So you can use this transform results field to go, like, for instance, data.results.map result, and then, you know, pull out the metadata.is deleted value. I'm not going to do that in this case, but you can. You're not just having to use what's returned raw from the API. And then one really important final qualifier here is that in this case, I'm requesting data straight from Codat's API, and I'm not ingesting it into my own system. I'm using Codat in a way that you probably wouldn't want to at scale. And indeed, our rate limits and things are built for you to actually be, you know, link the company, ingest the data, then do what you want with it. So just a hazard here that this is more what you'd want to do for prototyping. Really dig into this data, understand what to build with it, and then get it into your own system and build a kind of robust set of data flows yourself. I talked about CSV, and we do actually in the portal also offer some levels of Excel export. So I can export data, but this isn't. This doesn't cover everything, and if you wanted to manipulate that data before downloading it to the CSV in Retool, then you could do that too. So, like, all of these tables are instantly kind of, oh look, I've downloaded it as a CSV. I could send that over to my data team or give that someone in to manipulate in Excel, and they could build a model, and then they could give that back to me, and I could build that model into Retool. So you can have quite a nice back and forth. Or I could spend some time upskilling someone to sort of work straight into Retool. And then finally, kind of all the filters that you might want to do, all the sorting. Yeah, it's all there. And you can build up this kind of array of endpoints until you've got all the data you want, until you've got all the visual representations you want, etc. So hopefully that is a useful kind of whirlwind tour of how to build something quite quickly that can get you unblocked at those early stages of understanding what Codat can do for your use case.